So I'm going to say what's going on to everyone. How you doing today, man? We are excited. We're excited about being here today. We're excited about No More Hiding and Manhood podcast and just what's happening in the atmosphere, what's happening with the brothers. I'm telling you, man, this has been a very exciting journey. And today, we're going to come back and we're going to bring back the conversation that we had with Dr. Petty and our brothers. We got Brother Teron Ray and Brother Anthony Burr who's going to be joining us. We're going to bring back that conversation that we were talking about anger and the impact of anger and how anger really impacts the man's life. And I know last week we had some sisters that was aboard and they was listening in and really chiming in. So once again, we're going to invite you to join us. We're going to invite you to have that conversation and to be able to dialogue with us today. Guess what? We're simulcasting on several different medias. So we're looking at YouTube today. We're also on Periscope and we're also on Facebook and Twitter. And so not Twitter, Instagram. So feel free to join us on any one of those mediums. And those who are joining us for the very first time, this is No More Hiding. And No More Hiding is a conduit for men, where men can find a safe space to be able to deal with the things that's going on in their lives. And so we provide this opportunity for men to chime in. We provide this opportunity for men to discuss what's going on and be able to dialogue about this. These are everyday men who you can see on the street, not someone who might be famous or whatever, but just men who are famous in their own right because they're making it happen with their families, on their jobs, in their communities. And so we're inviting brothers to join us. We're inviting, this is Focus with Men, right? And so our motto is my manhood, my mission, because we know that this is our manhood and we all have a mission. We all have something that's important for us to be able to accomplish. So with that said, I'm going to invite our brothers. Brothers, what's going on, man? Join us in this conversation. How you doing today? What's happening with you?
Good morning, and I'm glad to be here on this sunny Saturday morning.
Ooh, we had some rough weather, didn't we? We had out
Yeah,
there.
but you know what? It's been pretty nice here in St. Louis the last couple of days. So I got to get out, do some walking and exercising. Lost about 10 pounds, so I'm feeling really good at this point.
You got to
So
get a secret, man, because it seems like I go up and down like a seesaw.
yeah, well let me tell you, it's I started this meal replacement shakes some weeks ago, so it's been slow going, but I mean, hey, 10 pounds is 10 pounds all day long, so I'm gonna take.
That's it. That's it. Brother Bird, what's happening with
Good
you?
morning. Good morning. I'm doing well. The weather is nice. I ran a couple times, got some fresh air, shot a little basketball with my son on his birthday the other day. And I'm just
Happy belated
enjoying
birthday.
this. What's that?
Happy belated birthday to him.
Yes, he hit the double digits. So he's a little excited. So
Good deal.
we'll
Good deal.
celebrate his birthday today. Food and parents come over, things like that.
Okay.
And I'm ready to get started on part two of this discussion.
That's it. That's it. And man, talking about part two, we have the man. We have him here today, Dr. Douglas Petty. I know he don't like to go by doctor, but I try to be formal and really recognize the accomplishment that Dr. Petty has done in his lifetime. And so, Dr. Petty, what's going on? How are you doing today?
I am doing great. Glad to be here, counting my blessings throughout the day. I don't wait till the day and say count my blessings for today. I count them throughout the day.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So how so we had an awesome conversation last week when we met on the first of this month. And by the way, for those who are tuning in, we meet every first and third Saturday of the month at 9:30. And as I said, historically we've been on Facebook Live, but now we're on Periscope. We're also on YouTube, and we have a YouTube channel, No More Hiding for Men. So you can join us on several different mediums. But last week, the last time we were together, we had a really good conversation and we started talking about the impact of anger and how anger really has this damaging effect, right? But Dr. Petty, he shifted it a little bit on us and he started talking about the origins of anger. And I was thinking about that idea of origin because when we think about the idea of origin, we're talking about that seed, right? That seed and what we see when we see those big oak trees and things like that. We don't think that one day that was just a seed. That was just something really small that over time just grew and grew and grew and grew. And now it provides shade, or it could be a hindrance, right? Depending on how you see it. That oak tree could be, it could be shade for kids to sit up under in the summertime, or the roots could be so deep that it start to interfere with the lines that go to the house. So when we talk about the origins and we talk about where this issue of anger began, he really provided us with some really good information and insight. So I want to, before we jump into it, because you all, for those who this is your first time, we're really having an opportunity to sit with us and do and be a part of this. What we do with No More Hiding is we try to educate. Right. I know we have a lot of podcasts out there and people that are entertaining and things like that, but this is more like education is, and so it's edutaining, right? So we educate you at the same time we try to and have the humor and the laughter, but we want you to take some things with you. We want you to really go back and say, man, I gained something from that conversation, and I really now have a better understanding of whatever that particular issue is. And so we want to share with you just a couple things throughout this day, and I'll bring it up. Give me 1 second and, and share my screen here. Be able to hear that on that side.
Or freeze. When distinguishing a threat, the amygdala activates the hypothalamus, which tells our pituitary glands to release the hormones like the stress chemical cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine. Before we're even aware, our body is flooded with hormones and neurotransmitters that shoot up our heart rate, energize our muscles, and increase blood pressure, all to get us ready to fight. Systems like digestion and vision are limited, along with our prefrontal cortex, which controls reasoning. Our hippocampus quiets, reducing short-term memory and new memory formation. All this makes us impulsive decision makers who may say harsh words we don't remember after the fact. These reactions helped our ancestors survive wild animal attacks, but the long-term effects ravage our modern bodies. Too much anger compromises our brains and creates high blood pressure, heart disease, and compromised immune systems. Worse, the amygdala has trouble distinguishing modern slights from imaginary threats. So how do we manage our anger? Brain scans of murderers show damaged or less active prefrontal cortexes, showing that one key way to combat anger is to strengthen that area. But can you grow gray matter? Yes. Research shows that meditation has been shown to both shrink the amygdala and grow the prefrontal cortex. Research also shows that venting or suppressing anger actually builds it. Instead, mindfully observe your feelings or try reframing them. Imagine learning that the driver who cut you off just lost their child. Your anger would likely immediately turn into compassion. Our imagination can trigger the amygdala or quiet it. Try creating stories that reframe an offender's actions when there is no real threat. And don't forget meditation. Meditation is by far and away the best practice for reducing all recurring negative emotions. Changing how we approach our anger literally changes our brains. It frees us from the tyranny of automatic responses and helps us enjoy greater health, longevity, and fulfillment so we can thrive.
Thrive Union is
All right, all right. So that kind of gives us a good start to kind of think about the idea when we're looking at the impact of anger on the brain and how the biological aspects of anger and some of those strategies that I know we're going to talk about today before we end this discussion, some of those strategies for managing when we deal with anger. But as I was saying before, we want to we want to go back and bring it forward. So we talked about the origins, and Dr. Petty shared with us the origin, and he gave us four origins. So just as a way to really reflect on those, the first one he gave us is it looked at the origin of hurt and how unresolved hurt or previous hurt in our lives creates this seed that eventually manifests in anger. And sometimes we can even see that we can see that as early in a child that's 4 or 5 years old when they've been hurt and how they respond with anger and throwing and tantrums. And as we grow, we become grown men who throw tantrums and hurt and try to come at people. So, brothers, what's your thoughts on that, man? What when you heard that last week, what came to mind to you?
What I mean, I can look at myself as far as being hurt when you're younger and you kind of hold that in and you're less vulnerable. But then with the population of people that I deal with, a lot of the I would say offenders, those who have committed crimes, I look at how they lash out because they've been hurt. A lot of the young men, fathers weren't around, so they're lashing out at people because of that hurt. And some of them don't even recognize where the hurt is coming from. And then some of them, you can gather that you can see that my dad wasn't around, and so they're just bitter. As much as you talk to them, you can still they're still angry, and they've never gotten past that because they're still hurt. Like they'll cover it up and kind of forget about it, but they have no way to deal with it. And I think that's kind of important for those guys to heal. So that's the first thing that I thought about when we talked about hurt
Mm,
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, what I thought about was my, kind of like Tony, my personal experience uh, growing up, missing out or carrying certain aspects of life with me that I couldn't possibly fathom that would have an impact. I would hold it in so much, but then I would have these explosions at the littlest thing. So it caused me to get into, little scuffles or fights. You know, now I was sneaky with it, so I didn't get caught or suspended, but they happened, and it was like I became, very, I guess, I became very apprehensive about expressing certain things, and so I started avoiding certain situations because I knew the outcome would be negative. So as I've grown, uh, that was a coping mechanism until I went to counseling and then was able to figure out how to talk through this and get some tools to be able to use that would allow me to um, express anger or the hurt, address that hurt at a deeper level and go back and understand what forgiveness and different things could do for me internally. That would, but as I look back, I realized how many relationships I had damaged simply because I was holding on to hurt that I experienced when I was younger. And then I just built on it over the years of disappointment from various individuals in my life. And, again, it manifests itself negatively in relationships.
that's it. That's it. And when we think about this, Dr. Petty, I want to bring you in this conversation. Why do you think men? Why do you think it's so difficult for men to deal with hurt?
Well, men in particular, that this whole king conquer thing. I'm
Okay.
in charge. I'm on my throne. I run my world. Nobody can really tell me what to do. So the fact of being transparent enough to admit that I have frailties, to admit that I have flaws, gets in the way. So as a result, we deny hurt. We deny the level of pain that we're in because we have this image, this image that we like to keep, and it is particularly prevalent among men of color
Mm,
because of the historical impact of things that have transpired, the identity being taken away, the whole issue of you're not this. If you were a man, you would do this, you would do that, and that's why the curse, the loudest curse that a female can give toward a man is if you were a man. I mean, that is the loudest
mm,
cuss word, not curse word, cuss word. You may as well just crack his head. As soon as you say, if you were a man, I mean, that's the lowest that you can go for a man
Man,
because of all the other stuff that's going on. If you were a man, a real man, and those are the kind of things, and they have those in their back pocket when it's convenient, when they want to shut you down. So that kind of goes like that. So well, I guess that one got out, but it got out. So that's the deal.
woo. Yeah,
I
man, I'm
felt that.
telling you,
I felt that one.
I know. It was like one of those. It was like, okay, in the podcast, everything. And so when we think about it, man, because all our lives, even when we're younger, we're trying to shape our identity as a man, right? And we even when we're a little dude, we don't want to be considered anything but going to a man, right? And so
Yeah,
and so
I ain't no punk. I mean, before you start out with, don't let them punk you. I mean, we got all kinds of stuff going on that's messed up. It's all
man,
messed up.
Yes.
no, and so man, when we talking about that hurt, and ladies, if you're listening in, it's something about it. It's something about when we hear those words. If you were a man, and oftentimes if we like in my situation, we're looking for that mirror, right? We're looking for that mirror to help identify what is manhood, and trying to sort through all these different things that's going on, right? And so what's manhood besides that being a male who has a biological component to himself, meaning having a penis, and also being 21, right? So what is manhood past those things, past being a father, past being a husband, those roles? What is actually being a man? So that's a conversation that I'm sure we're going to have in another discussion. And so I want to look at number two. Number two area is rejection, the origin. So we're doing looking at what we talked about last time. And the second the origin of anger is rejection. And so when we are rejected, and this is not just specific to men, but since this is a male broadcast and we are letting our sisters listen in, feel free also to chime in. We know we got Trina and Yolanda, and Stephanie's on here, and we got Brother Tyrone Butler, we got Brother Derek Williams. So we appreciate you all chiming in. So feel free to join us in this conversation, and feel free to add your thoughts to it, Brother Tyree Butler. So when we're looking at the idea of rejection, right? And rejection comes in so many forms, especially in the African American community. And the thing, brother T. Patrick talked about this, and I have the same experience with not having the relationship we would desire with those who were supposed to be nurturers. In particular, it would be with my biological dad, who was not there, who was not present, who I had not met. And so I didn't realize how not having that relationship actually equated to feeling rejected in some way. And it took a while for me to come to the realization that, man, I'm actually carrying this rejection on the inside of me, and didn't even realize it. Didn't realize that was a seed that was producing some of the fruit. And that fruit had looked like not trusting. That fruit, it manifested itself in my life as anger and outrage and all these other things, because through my lens that I was looking at life, right? If you didn't agree with me, then that rejection was metastasized. So what do you think, brothers? What share your views?
Yeah, I mean, it does, and personally, I experienced uh, a wrongful, termination. And I can't speak too much about it. We're in active litigation right now, but you know what I mean. And that impacted me. So it was that initial rejection to go through a situation to where you didn't do anything wrong, but politics as it was lended a hand, and then you begin to question yourself. So I'm questioning self work. What did I do wrong? Well, I didn't do anything wrong. How did I? What could I have done different? And I realized it was nothing I could have done different. It was just I was just not what they wanted at that particular point. And I had to accept that. And I say all of that to say the fact that I went through about a year and a half period of I probably put in 500 applications, contacted all my contacts, Nothing, man. I mean, I went on 50 interviews and I got rejected 50 times.
Man,
And I mean, it was, I would do five, 3, 4, 5 interviews with the same group, new people coming in to assess. I'm thinking finally I'm moving forward. And that rejection, it bubbled up because again, it was like, and then when I went to counseling, I'm talking about family issues and different things like that. That I'm like, well, what does that have to do with it? But then I began to understand that, what I mean, this is really impacting, what I believe in myself. And it took a while for me to figure that out, but it was rejection uh, constantly on top of the rejection that I had not healed. And so, it was just, it became too much to deal with. I had to break life down into little bitty bite-sized pieces to make it through. But, yeah, that rejection is something else. And I think people don't always understand, um, how much of an impact, even some of the littlest gestures of the people around you in that rejection, will send you, and it can send a person in a tailspin.
yeah, no,
Yeah, because mine is similar as far as being a work example where you get bypassed for a promotion. So then you're mad that you're not hating on the person that's promoted or the people, but you're angry at your boss. You're angry at different people, but then you're projecting that around your loved ones too. So that rejection can start hindering relationships where I told you guys, as far as my anger, I go more inward than lash out. So I'm present, but I'm not present. Just because I'm sitting there repeating what's going on, and I'm mad at my supervisor or mad at, you know, all the reasons why I didn't get promoted. And when I ask why, there's nothing tangible. It's all subjective stuff. So you still can't even tell me what I need to work on. So that just builds to being angry.
I was sitting there thinking about that, and I was thinking about the theory of the social strain, and that, and the inability to be able to provide for yourself, and that's in any area, whether promoting or what have you. So, and how that creates this issue. It creates this intrinsic issue. Dr. Patty, you were going to say something.
Well, let me give the long-term solution to all of this, and then we'll talk it through. That ultimately, anger is one of the multiple emotions that we have. Anger, just like any of our other emotions, get out of control when we lack the ability to manage our emotions. At the root of all anger really is the inability to manage emotions. Anger happens to be one of them that manifests and it blows itself up. So it's an issue of emotional intelligence. If we play this scenario all the way out, it's about emotional intelligence and our inability to manage them, because there are some people who could be joyful and excited, and it goes over the top. It's unmanageable. Somebody gets a promotion, somebody gets excited, they drink too much, they go too much, they do too much, so it still is out of control. So that's the kind of thing that we're focusing on, the inability to manage emotion. And once we get a hold of the fact, and so the inability to manage emotions really is an indication of a lack of self-management. So if I think about self-management, then if I'm not doing that very well, then these other little things will seep out. My inability to deal with anger, my inability to deal with sadness, my inability to deal with all these other things, because my not being good at managing me, the person, and I get out of balance. Now I'm all over the place. So I just gave the big ticket answer, but we can flesh it out as we go along. Because if I think about hurt, if I think about rejection, if I think about frustration, if I think about fear, the four things that we had gone over, it has much to do with what did I choose to do with that emotion when it reared itself up?
Hmm.
And what place does it really play down inside of me? What does it do to me? How has it affected me? Am I still the same person that I was before that emotion reared itself up? Am I still the same person, or did I become somebody else? Well, all of the manifestation of anger still is reflective of who the person is. Nobody can plant an anger seed down inside of us. I mean, it's a manifestation of who we are anyway. And although we'd rather point to a circumstance or something that triggered it, but it was triggered down on the inside of us because we had never reconciled who we were as a person ourselves.
So you says it's a manifestation of who we are, right? And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and as we're talking about that, and you shared the other 2 points, and we can move on to we have the origins. The first four that we talked about was hurt, rejection, frustration, and fear. And so those are the four. You could go back and look at the podcast. We upload this. Also, you could find it on YouTube under our No More Hiding for Men. But we're gonna move on and just build on this conversation. So you said it's a manifestation of who we are, but we don't come here in that condition, right? And so we don't come
Right.
well.
In which condition?
And we don't come and there's a debate, nature nurture, but
Okay. Okay.
we don't necessarily come in the position where most of us are angry or hurt or things of that nature, right? So
Well,
it's our
yeah,
environment
yeah,
that plays
yeah,
a part.
yeah. Well, uh, at conception, all right, let me give you this biological anatomy and physiology thing. At conception, the seed that connects down inside of the womb when fertilization actually occurs. A person is everything that they will ever be at that moment. Everything is in them. All thoughts, dreams, aspirations, it's all self-contained at the very beginning. Because there is no new strand of DNA that's given to somebody by the time they become 5 or 6 or 15 or 21 or 30. Everything is self-contained at conception. At conception, capacity, ability to learn, everything is right there. A child in the womb is everything they could possibly become at conception. Now, what happens is there are discoveries along the way in order to begin to recognize what capacity do I have, but it's already self-contained. I just come to discover more about me. So when I recognize that I come to discover more about me, so if I got a bad attitude, I had a self-contained bad attitude in the womb. So if I'm really going to blame anybody, it has to be the seed and the seed carrier. It goes back to them. That's where it all began there. So if I'm starting to get mad at another human, then I got to remember it was the DNA of my mother and father that I have become. I am the product of my mother's and father's DNA, and that be me. That be me. So anything that comes out of me was in me as a result of my mother and father. So all the stuff, all the junk, all the stuff that they had never dealt with, part of their own makeup and design. So I become a composite of my mother and my father. It ain't Uncle Joe and Bobby Sue. It's my mother and my father. And so now I have to come to discover me, get to know me better. And this self-discovery, so many times we're in pursuit of somebody else or being like somebody else. We spend so much time trying to be like somebody else that we don't take the time to get to know ourselves.
That's a lot there.
Yeah. So
all right, well, we just did the dump truck, so now you got to flush yourself through it.
I'm sitting there and the quietness is we're processing. We got folks that's chiming in. We got we have to get to the root. We have to get to the root of it. We are exposed to what we're exposed to has a great impact on us, and then sadly, most of us we're taught that it's nature. And so when we're looking at this idea, then that means as parents we have a great responsibility to really be transparent with our kids about who we are. If the connection is between the egg and the seed, which produces the life, and then what's in the egg and the seed goes into the life, right? Then as a father, then I have a responsibility with my children to really be transparent about who I am, which lends itself to another conversation. Then I'm gonna throw out one more. If one is missing, say they had to be present at the moment of conception, but then throughout the process of life, one disappears, then now that's a whole nother issue that we're dealing with, right?
Uh, if you want to be honest about it,
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of cases, we're better off if one of them is not there, depending upon their development and makeup and design. They can do us more harm than good. But oftentimes, when one is not there, then we get angry at them for not being there, when actually it could have been a great favor with them not being there. But again, contextually, we've got to look at, if I'm saying, and again, that does not dismiss the fact that the fatherless homes are dramatically impacted. That's not to suggest that at all. But then at the same time, if I'm continually looking at that, then that still takes me away from looking at me. Because I'll be talking about, well, if I had a dad, because the theories, the funding, all talked about, well, in the community of color, these absentee fathers, and then so as a result, that's why they can't get it together. That couldn't be true because there's too many who have. Now, we need that. However, that's not the catch-all, do-all, win-all, because as I say, my dad was physically in the household with me, but my dad played no part in the child-rearing aspect. He was physically there, but his voice had little or no impact because he was not involved in the process. So physically he was there, so they couldn't say I was without a dad coming up. My dad was always physically there. It gets back again. Will I take that honest, courageous look at me, given all the circumstances that I've been exposed to, everything that has transpired? Am I going to stop right now and say, I need to take an honest look at what got me to where I am right now? And I can only start today. I can't change my past, but I can start today not being controlled by my past. My past is my past. Now, there are assets, there are things I need to be honest enough to look at, but I don't have to be victimized as a result of my past. I don't have to be a victim. I may have been victimized, but because somebody has been victimized does not mean they have a right to call themselves a victim.
Okay.
They just could have been victimized. And too many times we celebrate the victimization and calling ourselves a victim instead of saying, what can I learn from this? And that becomes a different way, because I've got to look at me in order to say, because each one of us honestly could talk about, if this hadn't happened, if that wouldn't have happened, then I'd be here. If I had had this, if I had the chance that somebody else had, if I only had had this, if I had had this. It's like, really? Is that really true? Do you really know? The only way you would know, you would have had to have played that scenario out to the letter the way somebody else is, and it could not have turned out the same way because you're not that person. So I've never wanted to be somebody else. The reason why I've never wanted to be somebody else, because I knew I couldn't be somebody else, because I'm only me. I can look, I can learn, but I could never become, because I can only be what I'm made to be. And the only option I have is to build the best me and learn everything else I can from that. So if I really go there, now I can deal honestly with my anger. Because now I want to know, why am I going here? And what could I do for it not to control me? But I've got to be willing to look at me. I've got to be willing to look at me and accept the fact I got stuff going on. Question is, do I want to keep having stuff going on? I can admit I'm angry, but now I got to decide, do I want to continue to be like that? Is this the life I want to live? Now, if I keep blaming somebody, if I keep looking at situations, I'll stay angry, because it will always be an external perpetrator that I'm blaming, and the real perpetrator is inside of me.
So when we think about that, it's almost like outside, inside. No, it's more like inside, outside, inside.
Right. Right. Oh
Okay,
yeah.
like
And here's the thing. I know that some people will say, "Oh, it's not like that. You're making it sound so simple." Well, if I'm still looking on the outside, it will be complicated because I'll still continue to blame a circumstance or a person for my situation, my condition, my lack of aspiration, my lack of elevation. I will still be looking on the outside blaming somebody else.
Hmm.
well,
There's always somebody I can throw some blame on. How much of it am I looking at me? I need to look at me first, put myself in the best position. And even when some things don't go the way that I want them to go, I still have to recognize, was that the best way anyway? Even if it didn't go the way that I thought, was that still the best way for me? I need to really be honest, because here's the thing. We have to, we have here's a quote. Okay, let me do this. Prosperity breeds softness, adversity breeds toughness. If I don't have some challenges in my life, I'll never mature to become the person that I'm fully made to be. I never will unless I have adversity.
Yeah, and I think that's why healing is so important. I posted something, and this conversation makes it relevant, more relevant than I thought. I mean, it was a quote from a novelist, Anne Lamott, and she basically said that most profound uh, act we owe to our children is our own healing. And if we're bringing that to the table, it's good for individuals who may not have had children yet to kind of look at that and see what you are carrying and what you are going to manifest in this child when you conceive it, that you may not have dealt with, but to go to your point, Dr. Petty, your most recent point, which is about prosperity breeding softness and adversity making you tougher. um, I would not, had I not experienced what I went through, um, I wouldn't have been in position to take the job that I have now, which is 10 times better than the job that I had. But I had to go through this 2 year period of unemployment and rejection. And I think back to all of those jobs that I would have settled for. Had I any one of those jobs, I would have taken if they'd offered it to me. And I still would not be where I am at this particular point. And I don't think I would have looked at it any differently if I had not started to do the work. Still doing it, but I mean, you know, um, if I hadn't, it caused me to go to counseling to deal with some issues that I hadn't dealt with to shape my outlook for the future 100% differently. And now I react to things a lot differently. I notice when it comes to rejection and different things. After you go to 50 interviews and you don't get 50 jobs, you just kind of like, wait a minute. You know what I mean? I've been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray. I got all this education and this experience, and I'm still not good enough. But I look back and say, man, the right job came at the right time. It was just figuring out how to maintain during that process. Being a master's degree HR professional, driving DoorDash and then working at Home Depot part time to take care of my 4 kids. I'm proud of that. You know what I mean? It was a humbling experience for me, and it made me a better HR leader when I finally got to where I am, and in 11 months, it elevated me to a global role at this particular point, which I'm excited about. If I hadn't gone through that, I would not have been in position.
Now here's another reality. If any incident or act that you would rather not have wanted to happen had not occurred, none of us could be the people that we are today. It required every single thing that has happened to shape and make us who we are today. If you take away anything, you're somebody else. You're absolutely somebody else. Although there are things we would say, oh, well, I didn't really have to go through that. I could have bypassed that. No, had you, you would not be the person that you are today. All of it absolutely necessary to shape you to the place where you are right now. You can't miss any sentence of something that somebody said to you and you be the same person that you are today. Something would be off. You would be missing something. And although so many times we would have been pursuing and would have preferred it to be different, but that different would have made you different now.
Hmm.
No,
Tony,
I
yeah,
I
go ahead, Tony.
agree with that because, well, not that I disagree, but just a thought that popped in my head was that when I got bypassed for the promotion, then I made Dr. Rice. I got hired at Lindenwood University as an adjunct instructor. My former wrestling coach asked me to be a middle school wrestling coach. So then I'm doing things that were fun to me versus getting promoted at the job and probably working more hours. And it was at that time where I understood my self worth and I had peace. And I just so took that adversity, me getting frustrated, and then my wife was like, "How long am I going to be down?" I'm like, "My pity part is over on Monday." And that seemed like everything changed after the promotion. And then when I look at the four that we've talked about, I can't wait to hear the rest of the other three. Besides hurt, my self worth helps me with the rejection, the frustration, and the fear. So I can manage those things. I just look at the hurt part of it, where when you get hurt and you're trusting of something, that's the one that I have a hard time trying to work past. That I can have the emotional intelligence and try to manage it, but that's the part that I have to work on. It's hard for me.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. I got it. Well, let me give you the next one. The next one is guilt.
Guilt. Okay.
Guilt. Guilt is at the root because we have this negative response uh, so many times when we've been done wrong. It is guilt or feeling bad about something that we have done that has happened to us. So then it's guilt. Or we do something and then we feel guilty and anger comes out because we're not okay with ourselves. We really are mad at ourselves and it comes out toward other people. It comes out. We messed something up. We know we did. You're angry because you messed it up, and now that thing spills over somewhere else.
Hmm.
Anger inside will always get to somebody else. That's why, again, if I am angry, rarely is it self contained. It typically is going to go to somebody else. Because if it's self contained, I deal with it and I keep it moving. But when I carry it around, if you could picture carrying around a bucket with water that's 120 degrees and you're walking around with it and you trip or stumble at all, and that hot water in that container is going to come out. It is not going to sit still. Not only is it coming out, it's going to burn or damage something along the way. That's what it's like walking around with anger. You've got this hot boiling water in a container and you're carrying it. You're carrying it. So it will affect you and anybody who comes close to you because you're carrying this boiling inferno around with you. And so guilt is that other thing, is that I know something. And although some other people may not even know it, but I know it and it can make me angry.
Man, and oftentimes we are carrying it around, and so with that guilt, and having that guilt, I think in my experience, oftentimes we don't know how to forgive ourselves, right? We'll know how
Right.
to, because look, we hear all these things, especially if you grow up in church. Okay, so I'm gonna say in church, I'd separate church from Christendom, right? And so when you grow up in church, you hear those what goes around comes around. So you're expecting the worst to happen because of our mistakes. You also hear, you trying to figure out if it's something you did that caused that, or if it was something else. You trying to find it. So and then you just carry this guilt and that is just overwhelming. It's almost like having to repay over and over and over and over again. No, and being able to release that, release
Right.
ourselves is difficult.
Right. Right. And so what you'll find is all these root causes are connected because guilt and fear are connected. If you really think about it, guilt and fear are
Okay.
connected. Then the same way with the next one, which is shame,
Okay.
which is that issue of self-condemnation, the shame. Think about it. I do something that I knew I shouldn't have done, so there's shame. Now
Okay.
I'm feeling guilty for what I've done. Now I'm afraid somebody's going to find out. You see how these things are all connected.
Mm-hmm.
So these dots, but each one of them, anger is a trigger. It triggers anger. I don't want anybody to find out. Somebody finds out, and then the fact that I might be questioned. So I've got all these things going on. So if there's something that I'm ashamed of, something that I'm ashamed of,
Mm-hmm.
it can push it because something I'm ashamed of, I tend to cover up.
Mm-hmm.
And if I tend to cover it up, then there again, it's like I'm covering up an emotion.
Mm.
It's back again to this emotion. I'm covering up. So I really can't just be normal, can't really be myself because I've got this thing that I'm trying to hide.
Okay.
This thing I'm trying to hide. So I'm still acting unnaturally. I'm still not. So there's this facade, there's this thing that's there, but it would take little or nothing for that thing to blow up.
Mm.
When you use that word hide, it came back to me with no more hiding, right? And so the birth of no more hiding came from that period of just feeling like, and part of the hiding had nothing to do with others as much as it had to do with self, right? And hiding
Right,
from myself, right?
right,
And hiding from my true self, whether I felt it was good or bad. And I started, when the Lord led me to over to Genesis and looked at Adam, and when Adam was in that fallen state, right, he hid because of the shame and the guilt he felt
right,
from what he had done, right? And him hiding, he just didn't hide. He tried to cover himself with things that really could not cover him, right? And so that caused me to explore and say, okay, what things am I trying to cover myself with? And and go through that list, whether it was education or careers or relationships and marriages and all these other things. What things am I trying to cover? Really, what I'm feeling on the inside, but I'm trying to cover it on the outside so I don't appear to be in this condition to others, right? Because that image deal.
right,
So,
right. Yeah, and that image thing is oh, that image thing, trying to give an impression,
mhm,
making impressions. We're wanting people to see what we want them to see in us. So we advertise and we put these things out there. Well, let me tell you who I really am and what I'm all about. So we're promoting image that could not necessarily resemble us at all, but it's this image that we promote. And we
mhm.
hope people don't really find out. We hope they don't really find out about us. We hope they don't find out that we're really living a double life.
Yeah,
And then what would they think of me? So I got all this shame, I got all these things. So what will they think of me? And that leads to the next one, which is humiliation. If I what's going to happen if people find out? Now I'm dealing with rejection. See how these things, they all tied, they keep connecting, bouncing back and forth. I get
hmm,
humiliated then because if there's rejection, I don't know what I'm going to do. Then who else can I go to? Who else knows? How many other people know? How am I going to
hmm,
deal with that? And they no longer will buy this image that I'm putting out there because they'll say now I'm false advertising.
mm,
And which gets back again, I've got to become okay with me, flaws, warts, and all.
hmm.
Own my stuff. I messed up. I was wrong. I've got to own it and be okay with that because I'm the person who I have to live with. If nobody else ever lives with me, I've still got to live with me. I'm the permanent resident inside of me. And I can't even get evicted. I can't even evict myself.
And that's heavy too because that is a hard and scary place to be to recognize and and say with your mouth who you really are, or who you really not. I mean, it terrified me, but it drove me to the point of depression. And so, I'm 31 years old. I've got everything you could think of. I mean, everybody's proud of me, but I'm miserable. And it was all when I think about all of these things, I was frustrated because I had guilt and fear that everybody was going to find out that I wasn't who I portrayed myself to be, and then I got to the point where I didn't even really want to be that. So I
Mm,
started acting. I started acting out. I started gambling. I
mm,
lost a lot of money, just self-destructive behavior. And I said something has to change because I can't do this. But it was terrifying. Still terrifying. The more I find out
yeah,
about myself every day.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And now you just mentioned depression. Depression is the next one.
Hmm.
Oh,
How about that?
So real quick before I want to recap for those who are just joining us. Those of us
Right,
who just joining us, we're having a discussion when we're dealing with anger, the impact of anger, but we're looking at the origins of anger. And so the origins of anger is hurt, frustration, fear, rejection, guilt, shame, humiliation, and now Dr. Petty has just given us another is depression, right? And so when we're looking at these things and how these things impact us as men, right? Not just men, because we know that these have they're universal to all mankind, but we're talking about it
right,
from a male centered point of
right.
view. So if you're just joining in, feel free to join in the chat, share your thoughts or what have you. If you even want to come in, if you got a man out there that wants to join us in this conversation, then feel free to join us in this conversation, right?
Yeah, yeah. Have them throw out some questions. That would be great because we're going to be able to back it up. Now, here's the thing. What it can say now, anger, depression is this inner anger. Now, here's the thing. Unless an individual has a chemical imbalance in their brain, a chemical imbalance. Now, this is the only exception. The only exception is a chemical imbalance, which has to be regulated by medication
Hmm.
because that one is outside of the control of the individual. That's a chemical imbalance. Then all these emotions are a choice, all of them,
Hmm.
because they're within the control. You say, well, what are you talking about? How do you deal with that? You could have someone to do a certain thing and you could go off, and another person could do the same thing and you'll give them a pass. Somebody in your house could spill something on the floor on your outfit and you would tell them all the reasons as to why that's unacceptable and maybe not in a very nice way. But let it be somebody who you admire and look up to, and they spill something on the floor, and you'll start saying, that's okay. We can clean it up. Don't even worry about it. Same
Hmm.
act, but we attribute it differently. That's why it shows we have a choice. It's a choice because the same act, we gave a different response to the very same thing. And we can all reflect where we've done that. We've given some people a pass for an act that we've given other people the business. Same act.
I've recognized that a lot lately at work,
Hmm.
that when someone does or does not do something, that I respond differently depending on who it is. And I've recently come to know that that is my bias. Or I might even tell a coworker, I've already got that in my head. So I'm trying to not think about it. But after being where I've worked for over 10 years, you kind of know certain patterns, but still it's hard to get a person the benefit of the doubt because I already have this bias in my head that if somebody doesn't do it, oh man, it's okay.
See,
Other person do it, I'm ready to go off or not
that,
deal with them.
yeah, yeah. And see, that's in us. That stuff is in us. And we have a lot more discretion than oftentimes we want to say. And then we will blow it up to be so horrible and terrible if somebody does certain thing, and we minimize it if somebody else does it.
Yes.
Somebody else does it.
A question on the chat says, why do we have selective empathy?
Because we want to. It's only because we want to. It doesn't have to be selective. If you turn the faucet on, the faucet runs to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm standing there monitoring it, turning it on and off, then it will be selective. It will be, well, you drink some of this water. No, I'm not giving you any. Well, no, this you do. Now you can, but I'm not giving you any. That's us. Oh no, you can come in. No, I'm not letting you in. Now let me check your ID. No, I'm not. You remind me of my bad uncle. No, you will not hear. I said I never would do that. You know, I remember what you did to me 6 months ago. I said I would never, ever in life, because we standing there monitoring the water supply. But you know the amazing thing about it? We want it for us all the time. We don't want anybody to not let us be a recipient. So it's a contradiction. We want it, mm-hmm. but we find ourselves not always giving it. But we always want it to be on when it's our turn.
What about in those situations where we don't feel like we deserve it, and so we don't ask for it? Because sometimes we just leave and we just carry that.
Then think about this. Does anybody ever have to be nice to us? Ever? No. Okay. So can we ever say we deserve it? At any point in time? Is it one time we deserve it more than at another time? Or do we ever deserve it when it all boils down?
Well, there are situations when we think about it, when we think about how nice we are to the other person, it's almost that's an expectation. It's like, so.
Well, but then we had a motive behind what we were doing. Then our own act was not genuine and sincere. We were doing it with the catch. We had a hook on the back end of it. You scratch my back, I scratch your back, as opposed to my being okay, whether they say thank you or not. And when I get to that point to be okay with me, nobody ever has to tell me thank you if I'm okay with me. But if I need their response in a certain way, then I'll always be anticipating a favorable response that's already made up in my mind. And when I don't get it, then I get an attitude. But if I'm a servant, and the key to all of this is being a servant. If I'm just a servant, then it doesn't matter what anybody does. I'm just looking for the next opportunity. Okay, well, they didn't say thank you then. Well, I'm not going to do it the next 50 times for them to say thank you. I'll just do it anyway.
I'm going to be 100%.
And here's the thing. It couldn't be said that they're using me because I chose to do it.
I'm going to be 100% here. This is the area I struggle. I'm not going to lie. I mean, my emotional is as emotionally intelligent as I want to be. Right at this point, yeah, it's that expectation just creeps in, and it's just like, and I try so hard. I'm gonna be a servant. I'm not gonna let this bother me. But then let it be 3 weeks later, and I'm just like, wait a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
You didn't give me nothing.
Yeah.
So I'm a work in progress. So I'm taking my notes just like everybody else.
Yeah. And listen, and I understand part of it here. And if we could do a visual, we can't really do it here, but I have to empty and replace. So for everything that's not good, I need to empty it out and replace it with something else. Because if I leave these same thoughts and feelings that I've had and then say I'm going to do better, then it's just like another New Year's resolution. Most of them are not kept. They're just said, and they could be so glaring and glossy. But if I did not put in the work to say I'm going to put this here instead of that, if I don't have something to replace what I'm already doing that's not good, by default, I'll end up going back to the same thing because I didn't deal with a replacement. For instance, if in the word of God in Ephesians 4, it says, be angry and sin not, the issue isn't my anger. I can acknowledge my anger. The question is, what did I do once I got there? It wasn't the anger, because anger is an emotion just like joy. It really is, what's my next step when I recognize and acknowledge that I am angry? Will I go down that path that I normally go, or do I have another path to go down? And if I don't have another path to go down, it's just a matter of time before I explode, because I didn't have an alternative. The last person that made me mad, and I had thoughts about what I would do to them and what I would say to them, if I have not decided something different to say and to do, that will be carried over to the next encounter with them, because I left it unresolved, left it a chance to grow and mature, because I didn't replace it with something. Now, if we had stinking food that stayed in the refrigerator too long, we don't just let it stay in there. We get it out of there because we know what it is doing. But we could have stinking attitude and keep holding on to it, walking around with it and wondering what smells so bad, because we didn't replace it.
So we got a question here. The question is, how do women deal with the significant other who is dealing with all of these and who wants to control how we respond?
Now, good. You have a decision to make. Do you want to continue to live under those circumstances? That's your first question. Do I want to continue to live under these circumstances, hoping that it gets better? That being one. And if you answer that to say, no, I don't, then the next thing has to be to say to this person, if this does not happen, then there is no more us. Because if the relationship is more important to you than your own well-being, then you'll be trapped and continue to tolerate and put up the same thing, because you're not okay with yourself. You've got to become okay with yourself and realize that's not acceptable. You don't really have to. You're not being hard, but it's causing you to be unnatural, and you're not the person who you know you want to be, because you're walking around on eggshells in response to them. So you have to ask, is this a life that I want to live? If the answer is no, then I need to change that. In fact, I meet with somebody in a couple of days about the same thing, is that what you described, that's what they were dealing with. And it's to say, is that really the life that you want to live? And you have a choice. You have a choice. Now, but as long as you cooperate with his antics, nothing will change, because there's no motivation, no incentive to do differently, because this is still working. They'll take you a little fuss for a moment and let you finish and go back to what they're doing. But actually, by description, you're in a classic abusive relationship. You just still may have your head on, but abusive relationship isn't just physical, it's emotional, psychological, financial, it's all of those things. So you're in an abusive relationship, and you have to decide, is that the type of relationship you want to continue to be in?
What about in the situation? So sometime in the earlier part of a relationship, we can make those moves quicker, but then sometimes individuals have invested a lot of emotional time capital, all these things in that relationship. And so, I mean, been together for years. So how does a person, I mean, you just can't, in that situation, you just can't be like, okay, either you change and I'm gonna give you this date or else, so it's
You
not as
really
easy.
can, though. What says that you can't do that? What says that you can't?
Because with that
You weren't
example,
ready for
you've
that one,
seen
right?
the signs.
Yeah, because it's to say, you have to ask yourself, what's more important, the toys or your well-being? You have to ask yourself, what has more value? What has more value? And it would not be the first time. In fact, just helped with somebody who had been together 35 years and finally reached a point to say, you know what? I am so exhausted. I should have already done this, but I'm going to do it now. There are a lot of people who endure relationships but don't have an enjoyable relationship. They endure them. And there are a lot of people who are enduring them simply because of the toys.
Mm. A
And you have
question
to
was
ask,
asked.
are the toys that valuable when it all boils down? Or what is of greater value? Your well-being will cost more than all those toys that you're trying to hold on to.
So
Think
one of the
about this. 1 day in the hospital, what does that cost? 3 days in the hospital, what does that cost? After a while, your toys would be paid for.
hmm. So a comment was put in there about fear and individual dealing with the idea of fear.
Fear of losing a relationship.
Hmm.
Okay.
Or fear, or even fear of when we're looking at fear of change.
Well, change can actually produce fear because you step into a place that's unfamiliar, and you feel like you're losing control. But you don't lose sight of what's the end game, where is it that you're trying to go, and that should be where the focus goes. So if I know that I need to get across this street because on the other side of the street I will no longer be in danger, but if I remain over here I'll be in danger. Although I've never been on the other side of the street, but I do know if I get to the other side of the street I will no longer be in danger. Now I have to determine which one is of greater value. I have to make that decision. And what you can find is there are people who would support you, who would walk with you through that process if you make the commitment to make a change. Because there are many who have had to do that same thing at some point in time in their life. The people that we look up to, had they not made changes, we would not be looking up to them. Because so many times there were a lot of things that did not go a certain way and they had to make adjustments and changes. And we look up to those people. So the very thing that they are doing that they did to be where they are the same types of decisions that we have to make.
We have a question that was asked, Brother Butler, who's joining us, and actually he's in California right now, so we're happy
Okay.
that he's watching us out there. He asked, when do you know to walk away from a relationship that is not growing?
Sit down with someone because if you're not able to be objective, then set up some time to meet with a third party, put everything on the table. They can help you to sort through it. Now, there's a young couple that will be dealing with that they with child and they are like oil and water. And what has happened is the thought of the child is keeping them so locked in. But the young man came to the place to realize I need to sit down for us to work this out because I recognize we're not healthy. We really love each other, but we're not healthy. So the goal is to say, you can still put boundaries in place. You have to have the very honest conversation because if you really love someone, uh, if you love someone, you have enough care for them that one, you can be without them, and two, you give them the right to make decisions that may not serve their best interest. If you really love someone, you can love them enough to recognize that our togetherness doesn't facilitate our well being. And that's an indication of real love. Because to love someone doesn't mean that you're still with them. Because if your presence with them doesn't give the best possible outcome for the two of you, then that love would permeate beneath the surface and say, we're better off not with each other. And if you have a difficult time processing it objectively, you need to sit down with a third party.
Mhm. These are some good questions, you all, and these are questions that's coming from the audience. So I want you to feel free to chime in, ask your questions, because these are some of the questions that individuals really want to know, and these are offshoots of this. These are offshoots of issues that we deal with, things that frustrate us, that create anger. So feel free to ask Dr. Petty, and he is qualified and academically, spiritually trained to be able to address some of these questions that are being asked. Um,
Dr. Petty, I have a question for you,
Yes, sir.
and I'm sure this somebody else might have the same thoughts. When I do my self reflection, looking at different angers, I looked at incidental anger, like somebody cut me off in traffic, I get
Right.
mad, a little road
Right.
rage. So I identified that one. I definitely have the empathetic anger. Somebody hurts, says something nasty about my kids or something like that, or my dad, or my kid comes back and says, "Well, Dad, this happened." I feel that anger too. But the one I look at, and I'm not, it was called hardened anger. And the thing was, you have a hard time. You basically have trouble forgiving and holding a grudge. You hang on to hate or bitterness. You're stuck in anger. And my thing isn't the hate part. It is the working past the forgetting, and moving on.
Okay. Okay. Now, actually, let me go to the unforgiveness, because that's one of the triggers. There are three others we have. Unforgiveness is one of them. To understand forgiveness, forgiveness says, I release you from the pain and hurt that you have caused me. Although I will be justified in retribution, I choose not to act on my retribution. I will be justified, but I choose to not. That's what forgiveness is. What it does, it gives you the chance to acknowledge the impact of the offense, but it also lets you know you can choose to forgive, and you're no longer being held hostage by the offense. Because when I don't forgive, I'm held hostage by the offense, because retribution is dominating my thinking. But if I commit to the fact to say, I'd be justified in retribution, but I choose to not do it, now I'm free. Now I'm free. But if I don't, it will linger and dominate my thinking and continue to build up. So it's either you want to get out of jail yourself by letting them go, or you've locked yourself in,
And
because it
that's
will
where
dominate your thinking.
and that's where you talk about replace it with something. So you
Right,
kind of get rid of that and then
right,
replace it with something else.
right. Because think about this: switch places and ask yourself, if you had done something wrong, would you want someone to forgive you? And when you switch and grace kicks in, it changes the whole dynamic. What if that were me? As wrong as it is, would I want somebody walking around hanging something over my head? And when you bring it to that place, then you realize, no, I really don't. So therefore, you have to say, I need to release them so that I'm released. If I don't release them, I'm not released. I'm the one that's in bondage.
I appreciate that.
we got a couple thoughts that's on there. It says, is it that you really love them, or that you love the idea of them, or the idea of love? And then there's another comment that says, in a past relationship, it was difficult to walk away from it because my heart was still attached, although mentally I was already gone. And then the last comment that was posted says, I can do the forgiveness part, however, the trust part. And
Okay,
so
let me deal with the last part. Trust has to be rebuilt. So therefore, it has to be known on the part of the person that it's a rebuilding process. You have to regain trust. When somebody betrays your trust, then you have to put some markers there in order to say, these are things that I need to be able to see. And it shouldn't be expected that automatic. It's as though it didn't happen. So they have to regain your trust. And that part of it is understood. Uh, in some other instances, when you talked about the relationship, the fantasy of it all, too many times we're drawn to individuals physically, which is the lowest level of intimacy. The lowest level of intimacy is physical. That's the absolute lowest, but oftentimes we give it more credit than it really should have. Think about this. You could be with someone in a relationship, it doesn't matter how many years, but how many hours during the course of the day are you physically touching them?
Hmm.
And when you take a real look at it, these moments of ecstasy that's so talked about, if you compare them during the course of a day, a week, or a month, the numbers are so minuscule. But we blow that thing up to be more than it is. So the physical aspect is the lowest level of intimacy
Okay.
because it becomes the emotional, intellectual part of it. Are we able to have conversation? Are we able to have similar goals? Do we look at things in a similar direction? Well, that's where the real intimacy occurs. The physical part, you don't have to have any of those things going on. You could just go find somebody and just get into a physical thing with someone. It doesn't even require you knowing their name
Hmm.
because it's an act. It's an act that only has value if it's with someone that you've attributed those other things to. But in our minds and our thoughts and in our teaching, we have said, oh, they really got it. I like their bill. I like this. And we start talking about all of the physical things. But then when it all boils down, you don't even know them. So many times we've been with people we don't know them, but we can't wait for that physical moment.
Hmm.
It's overrated. Sex, physical attraction is overrated. Overrated. Because there are some beautiful people with some foul attitudes, foul mindsets, physically attractive, but they're foul. So that won't keep you. That won't keep you with them. Sometimes you're trying to run for them as fast as you can.
Right. 100%. 100%. Hey, Dr. Petty, about the comment about the head versus the heart. I mentioned that once. Um, I don't think it was in this forum, but Dr. Rice and Anthony Bird know, I've had some battles with wisdom and desire, right? And it was like, and I realized how uh, desire is kind of it really is a formidable opponent to wisdom, right? And so we got the comment out there that talks about, you know, uh, what do you do when when you're gone in your head already, but your heart still is connected to this individual? How do you, what tips do you have or techniques do you have to kind of bring that home?
So you're talking about a soul tie the individual has where, and literally it's based
Hmm.
on familiarity, familiarity of, well, this is what we always do. This is how we do it. And it's almost like mechanical, like a machine where we know we do this, we do that.
Mm,
And your brain could shut off and you would end up doing that anyway. Uh, in some of these instances, we know that we have to stop and sit down and be honest with ourselves to walk through this. Ease, comfort, and pleasure, the familiarity, the predictability of a relationship has kept people together more than the real intimacy in and of itself. It had history, it had predictability, it had a routine, and we become comfortable because we like routines. If somebody were to ask me, then I would say the worst thing that a male and a female could do is to date because that's one of the most fraudulent activities that somebody could involve in. It's less than genuine. It's high levels of impersonation and lack of authenticity because you're getting to see a person at their absolute best when you're dating them, to trying to put forth their best front, the best image, and you don't see all of their junk. So it's fraudulent. Dating is actually fraudulent because you don't see the bad hair days. You're not experiencing the bad breath. You got a whole lot of stuff that will be there at a whole nother level. So it's fraudulent. It's fraudulent. That hair is not looking like that all the time. There are some times during the day that's not what it looks like. And I love the women. And when they put it on, they put it on. However, it's fraudulent. You know, that brother ain't like that all the time. He ain't smelling like that all the time. He ain't trying to get himself together. But when you see that image and you pursue this image and you schedule times, you get together, like, no, 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 no. Actually, if you're going to do it, courtship is a lot better, which says you don't even want to get with anybody unless they possibly somebody you're married. Mm. So you start out and you walk yourself through the process. Now you say, well, what are you talking about? I'm sure you dated. I can just hear people saying something like that. Well, let me tell you, the woman that I'm married to, we never went on a single date. We set a date for marriage. We never went on a single date. Not a single date. Started preparing to get married because it's too much fronting and too much illegal activity, too many things people have told them to say. So dating is a worst case scenario for somebody. Because if they're serious enough for you to spend time with, they ought to be serious enough for you to consider spending your rest of your life with. And that's not where you are from the beginning, then you might want to reconsider doing it. Don't try to use this thing about I'm lonely and everybody need to be with somebody. Well, you know, go ride a horse, do anything else.
Love it. I love it. Real talk here on Manhood Moments.
For real. We got some thoughts in the comment. It says as I get older, it says as I get older, I learned physical attraction doesn't mean anything when they're ugly on the inside. They don't bring anything to the table. And there was a thought that was says if trust is important, both will make the necessary adjustment to repair it. Um, and there was a thought that says the heart of a person is ugly, everything about them is. And so, and then also for those listening, we put in the chat the anger test. And so Dr. Petty shared with us the anger test. We put it on and No More Hiding on our Facebook page, and we'll also be loading it into our other social media pages. But we also put it in the chat so you can take this anger test and do an evaluation, right, of where you are in the areas where you're dealing with some challenges. I want to bring up one other thing, and Brother Tony was talking about it, so I want to kind of bring it up so individuals can kind of get a reference on what he was talking about when you talk about the types of anger. And so these are some of the types of anger that was brought up, which looks at chronic anger, overwhelmed anger, self-inflicted anger, judgmental anger, volatile anger. So these are just some of the types of anger that when we went out and did some research, because No More Hiding is about educating. And so when we went out and did some research and looked at these types of anger, and how those angers play a part, and so and I know when I looked at it and did a self evaluation, that chronic anger is one that had existed and been present in my life, And so I wanted to bring that up so individuals can actually see it, and see what he was referring to. And, Dr. Petty, any thoughts on any of these? I know you could kind of see them on here.
Oh no, I mean they're telling it like it is, and it's a matter of when you don't deal with it, it gets worse. It always gets worse. When if you don't deal with the root of it all, this thing controls you. It literally controls you, and you're at the mercy. You're at its mercy. And so many times, it's not even stopping to think, why am I angry? Next thing you know, you're just there. You're just there because the stuff has been suppressed for so long and never dealt with, and it takes on a life of its own. It really takes on a life of its own. So I know before we run out of time, let me just give you these last two, and then because we've talked about them
Okay.
at some level. The love is another one. Love or lack of appreciation. We get angry because we talk about the issue of reciprocity, where they're not doing for us what we believe we're doing for them. That we're the one that's doing more, and we don't get not being appreciated. Which Well, that one speaks for itself. And the last one is grief. We get angry about the loss, not just the loss of a loved one, the loss of anything, just like about the job, about whatever. Something we lose. Loss is loss is loss.
Okay.
It's more than just losing a loved one. A loss is loss is loss. And we respond to it all the same way.
And you
And
talk a
also,
little bit more about that when we talk about anger related to grief, because sometimes we get individuals who say, well, you should be over it because we give a time frame, or we have, especially if we're in an intimate relationship and we go through
yeah,
this loss
yeah,
and we're feeling this anger, and maybe our partner or whoever, our friend, is wondering, why are you so angry? And even the anger that we feel from against God, because,
yeah,
we may
yeah,
feel
yeah,
like we've been that was unfair. So talk a little bit, if you could,
yeah,
about anger and grief.
yeah. Well, uh, anger, uh, anger is real in loss, and you can't put anyone on the clock when they're grieving. You can talk about the stages that they may go through, but you can't put anyone on the clock because each situation is different. We probably go through the same phases, but you can't put anyone on the clock. Not, I mean, not at all. Anger, because their whole world has been rearranged. Anger, not knowing what to do next. Anger, because so much was dependent on that relationship. And so that's a normal, natural response to a major disruption in somebody's life. And we have to be just as gracious and patient with them as we would want somebody to be with us, because you're not down inside of the person. However, ultimately, ultimately, your goal in dealing with loss is to become a living memorial for the individual. Everything that they've represented in your life, you should become a living memorial, because if you don't, then you'll build a monument. So the healthy response to grief ultimately is to become a living memorial for everything the person really meant. If you don't, you will build a monument. What does building a monument mean? I'll reflect so much on the past that I can't live in the present. But if I become a living memorial, I live out my life to be able to say, because of them, these are things that I learned, that I was taught, and now your memory is alive and well all the time. Otherwise, you'll be building a monument about the past in terms of what it was. But if they meant something, they are alive and well inside of you by how you live.
Hmm.
And that frees you. And that actually frees you. So unless there's a chemical imbalance down inside of someone, anger can be managed. The chemical, and it can be managed if there's a chemical imbalance. You just need to go and have yourself checked in order to determine that, because they can do a full-blown assessment to determine whether or not you have a chemical imbalance down in your side and down inside. And then it can be, there are some levels of medication which would be helpful. But that's the exception. That's not the rule. Most of us just got issues,
Mm-hmm.
just got an attitude. And some of us like it so much, we don't want to be different.
Hmm.
We're gonna find somebody to blame for it anyway. Just like I've always wondered who that white man is that everybody has talked about. You know, that white man doing this, that, and the other. By now, he should be dead. Everybody been looking for him. I just want to always talking about the white man. Somebody should know where he is by now.
That's true.
We should have hemmed him in. All of us, we should have hemmed him in.
Right. So somebody should have had a
Somebody should have had him
conversation
by
with him.
now.
Look here, man.
Man, we're excited about the individuals that's joined us. Brother Tyrone, Brother Billy Price is out there. Sister Consuelo Meats has joined us. We're just excited, man, about the conversation that we're having. And we have this conversation every first and third Saturday of the month. And we've expanded. Initially, we've been on Facebook Live, but we're also on YouTube Live. We're on Periscope. We'll be moving into Instagram Live. And then over to LinkedIn Live. So we're expanding this platform to be able to share this information. Of course, No More Hiding is focused with men, but we understand that there are women in the lives of men who really love them and care about them. But our focus, our commitment is to working with men and to really making sure that men have what they need as it relates to their as it relates to their health, their wellness, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And we've had Dr. Petty, and he's been with us over these last two podcasts because we knew individuals really wanted this information. They really wanted to get this information about anger. And as you can see through the conversation, and we'll upload this podcast again, but as you can see in the conversation, that this area of anger really impacts us in so many areas, right? It impacts our relationships, it impacts our emotions, it impacts the way we think, it impacts how we live, it has impacted our past. And one of the things, as just to kind of reflect on it, the seat of a lot of this stuff is a part of our, even a part of our conception, right? And so as we work through these various challenges in our lives, it's important that sometimes that we get professional counseling, whether it's about our emotions, whether it's about rejection, understanding ourselves, whether it's about relationships. That professional counseling is so important, right? That we get this information and that we share with one another. And that's why we bring in individuals like Dr. Petty, who's going to help us. We are getting near to the end of the broadcast, but I don't want people to don't leave yet, all right? Because you might miss the very end. But before we leave, I want to share just a real quick. As you know, we do education. We call it edutainment. It starts with education first, and then we bring in laughter. But we want individuals to leave with something. So, real quick, there's a powerful story, right, about anger and letting it go. So I want to share this story. If you're listening in,
I want to share with you a powerful story about a snake and a saw. Before you question what a snake and the saw has to do with your life, it is about much more than a snake and a saw. It's about what happens to us when we react in anger. It's about what happens to us when we hold on to resentment and when we don't let go of negative emotions. It's about what can happen to us when we want negative things to happen to others. So the story, reaction to something it thought was out to get it. There's a powerful message here. Often we react in anger when we think others have hurt us, or when we assume that others are out to get us. We react when we don't need to. We hold on to resentment, and sometimes we hope the other gets hurt. But in doing so, we only end up hurting ourselves. The negative energy, the best life we can for ourselves. If someone does us wrong, rather than react angrily, maybe we should try to understand where that person is coming from. Show some compassion. Maybe they are having a bad day. Maybe all of their days are bad. When we look at things from a new perspective, it is much easier to move on, leaving all negative energy behind. Holding on does nothing good for our future. We must let go. We must move on before the anger consumes us and ruins us like a snake. Don't react. Instead, show compassion. Don't hold on. Instead, move on. And rather focus on creating the best life we can for ourselves.
so as we near the end of this podcast for this week, as always, we have our final thoughts. And so I'm going, Brother Anthony Bird, what's your thoughts? Give me some final thoughts on today's conversation.
First thought is, Dr. Petty, thank you for spending time with us 2 weeks in a row, imparting your wisdom with us. I've taken this journey as far as self-reflecting, looking at different things, and I think anger just works so well with me. And I can tell from my transition, just a quick story is that my neighbor walked the dog down the street to like the little field to use the bathroom. But 2 days ago, the dog dropped his feces in the street. And this happened Thursday. So yesterday, I was sitting outside like, man, I really hope this dude walks by and I can say something to him. But another thought was maybe just write a note on his car. Hey, man, next time, pick your dog stuff up. Another thought was maybe just tell my wife, and maybe she can go over there and tell her. So I've kind of watched my transition of how my default would have been to just really confront this guy. But then it's okay. There could be other steps to just man pick up your dog stuff. But I'm doing is just self-reflecting and understanding where my angle kind of comes from, and I do have to work on that number one, which is hurt. Just understand. So I just want to say thanks for everybody that's watching. Thanks for checking in on us. Thanks for interacting with us, and I'll see you on the first of the month.
Awesome, awesome. Brother T. Patrick, talk to us. What's your thoughts? Share some final thoughts.
I want to echo, Brother Bird's, gratitude towards Dr. Petty spending this time with us and giving us these real jewels of knowledge, as it pertains to anger and its origins and kind of how to deal with it. For me, my biggest takeaway is let me work on my my ever uh, ongoing need for reciprocity, and what I mean, working on trying to become a better servant because that's something that it's still a sore point for me, but the points are taken, and we do things. We're nice to people. We're nice to people because we choose to be, and because it serves a higher purpose, and sometimes you're not going to get things in return, and so I'm glad to have an opportunity to receive that nugget of wisdom, and as I move through this dating scene, we learned about uh, the pitfalls of dating. So I mean that's some good takeaways, guys. And like I say, as always, we have a good discussion, but always continue to work towards your best self, because we owe it to ourselves and everyone around us.
That's it. That's it. Man. And Dr. Petty, we really appreciate you being here the 2 weeks, and we're gonna give you. And please share with us what. Give us some nuggets of wisdom as we close this out.
Well. First of all, glad that you all have indulged me and asked me to be able to be. But it's a process that we all go through. It always changes because something different could come our way. But if there's one statement that it would focus on, it would be a two-part statement. One, don't look for anything from anyone. Just take your expectations off the table. Just don't look for anything. Focus on building the best you so that you can give yourself away. It frees you because now you don't have to look cross-eyed at somebody else. That will take up all your time.
Hmm. You know, this has been very, very valuable to us, and we really truly appreciate you all being here. And I want to take a moment just to say I appreciate you, Dr. Petty, for being with us, and then I also appreciate my co-hosts, Brother T. Patrick and Ray, and Brother Anthony Bird, for being willing to be a part of this journey. And then we got behind the scenes. I have my wife that's behind the scene, later, who's really working on the administrative side, and so we are really trying to provide this space, and it's not about the numbers, it's about the quality of the programming for No More Hiding for Men, and making sure that men have a space where they can be themselves, where they can share their thoughts, and they can have a safe space to be able to grow, come out of the place where we were, come out of hiding, right, and find that wholeness that our creator desired us to be in even before the conception, right? This is the space where God desired us to be in. He did not desire us to be broken or be torn or what have you. We go through some issues. We go through discovery, as Dr. Petty said, but even through the discovery, that's not supposed to destroy us, right? So we appreciate you all taking out the opportunity. We appreciate the questions. We're live every first and third Saturday of the month, on Facebook Live, YouTube Live. Our Facebook channel is No More Hiding. No More Hiding, MNH for men, or No More Hiding, that's HIDDING, because on Facebook they took it. And then also we're on Instagram, which is NMH for men, YouTube, No More Hiding, right? And so please follow us. Feel free to follow us. Our mission is, when we talk about our motto, it is my manhood, my mission. So as always, we're going to pray for those who may be listening in, and we ask God to touch and that He would move. Lord, we do thank you. We praise you for this day. We thank and praise you just for your grace and your mercy, everything that you're doing for us in this period. We know that we deal with a lot of things. We deal with anger, we deal with fear and humiliation and rejection, all these things. But Lord, we know that you're the answer, and you've given us the tools, you've given us the resources to help us to be able to resolve those things that exist in our lives. So we ask that you would move. We ask that you would touch that man or that woman that's listening in to this podcast, that's taking out the opportunity to actually grow and to learn, that they've heard something that can help them in their relationship with themselves or their relationships with others. And we're asking that you would continue to help us to come out of our place of hiding into our place of wholeness. We thank you now. We praise you forever in your most holy name. Amen. Amen. So once again, until we see you again, we'll see you next on the first of next month at 9:30. We're looking forward to having a conversation with you. So please be safe. Please take it easy